What is up, everyone? It is Quinn here, and with the NFL Combine wrapping up yesterday, I thought this would be a good opportunity to go through some of the biggest winners and losers at every position, I guess fantasy relevant positions, so quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight ends. So go through some of the biggest winners and losers. I know the Combine can be kind of polarizing. Some people, really like to get into it. They think it matters a ton. Other people think it's completely pointless. Athletic metrics, people aren't super into it. They think it's just, what you've done on the field. That's kind of what's going to dictate you as a player. Personally, I would say I'm somewhere in between those two takes. Obviously, what you've done on the field is most important, but I do think the Combine will kind of affect NFL teams' processes, and I think it will kind of shake up some of the draft capital for these players, and I think that obviously can have an effect on them moving forward and will change how, we evaluate players for Dynasty fantasy football. So just going through all the fantasy relevant positions. As always, if you guys enjoy the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But let's just jump right into it. We're going to start it off with the quarterbacks, and I actually just have two winners here, no losers at the quarterback position. We just have, probably like a top 4 or 5 that are super relevant. I don't really think any of them tanked their stock at the Combine. But starting off with the biggest winner, I have Anthony Richardson. And we kind of knew that he was going to be a really good athlete. We knew that was his skill set. I don't think we knew that he was going to be maybe the craziest athlete we've ever seen at the quarterback position. Like, I've seen some people, kind of crapping on it because, oh, he's super athletic, but look what he did at Florida. He wasn't a great quarterback. All of this stuff. I still think this is wildly impressive. The dude had a 4.43 40-yard dash, 40.5-inch vertical jump, 10 foot 9 inches in the long jump, and he did all of that at 6'4", 244 pounds. So this man is an absolute unit. This dude is, pretty much an athletic freak. And then also in the throwing portion, he was solid. He had him and CJ Stroud going back and forth. Obviously, he wasn't necessarily keeping pace with CJ Stroud, but he was still pretty solid in the throwing portion. So I think with that kind of performance, with the ceiling he has, all his, raw ability, I think he's pretty much locked into the top 10 picks. And I feel like if he's going in the top 10, he's probably going to be a top 4 Dynasty rookie pick in Superflex. So you're looking at Bijan Robinson, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. I feel like Anthony Richardson would be right in there. So he is definitely, a huge winner from that Combine performance. And I also feel like, this seems kind of crazy because typically, right, if you're drafting a quarterback and they bust, you're just kind of screwed. Anthony Richardson, even if he doesn't, click as a quarterback, this dude has a floor of being like a Taysom Hill on steroids, which is just something I don't know if we've really seen at the quarterback position. So just a really crazy athlete and really impressive numbers out of Anthony Richardson. Now, the second winner at the quarterback position is going to be CJ Stroud. He didn't participate in any of the athletic testing, but the dude just came out and put on a clinic in the throwing portion. He also showcased some pretty impressive arm strength. Coming into the day, it seemed like everyone was pretty high on, Levis and Anthony Richardson in terms of their deep ball, their arm strength. But really, Stroud hung in there, with both those guys, if not having more arm strength than those dudes. So I think, he's really just established himself as a top 5 guy and someone who will probably be a top 3, probably at worst top 4 Superflex Dynasty rookie pick. Now, moving over to the running back position, this running back class is pretty interesting because we have a clear-cut number 1. Obviously, it's Bijan Robinson. He was very solid at the Combine, came in solid workhorse size, and then also very impressive in the athletic testing. But then in this class, we've got these kind of smaller running backs, the guys just around 200 pounds or even, in the 180, 190 range. And so those guys, they tested pretty well athletically, but obviously the size is the concern. And then we've got some of the heavier backs who obviously aren't going to, light up the 40 and all this stuff because they do have more weight to carry around. So I think a lot of guys put up numbers we were kind of expecting. But the one winner I have here is going to be Chase Brown, who's kind of one of the only running backs we saw who has decent size while also being a top athlete. So he's 5'9.5", so nothing crazy there, but he weighed in at 210 pounds. So, that's pretty solid size. He's not sub 200 like we've seen with some of these other dudes. Then he comes out, he runs a 4.4 340. He had the best vertical and the best broad jump at the running back position. and he's also coming off of 2 monster seasons this past year. I mean, this is a dude who went for 1,883 yards from scrimmage and 13 total touchdowns. So I think he's definitely a guy who kind of stepped in, was maybe more towards like the back end of the top 10 or top 12 running backs in this class. I think he came into the combine, lit it up, and is someone who definitely helped his draft capital, and is someone we're going to have to be, on the lookout for moving forward. Now, moving over to the wide receiver position, first position, we're going to have, a winner and some losers. Going to start it off with a winner here, and it's Jackson Smith-Njigba. And to be totally honest, it's not like Jackson Smith-Njigba came in and totally lit up the combine, but I think it was a solid performance from him. And then some of the other wide receivers in his kind of tier with his expected draft capital, some of those guys didn't really perform to a very high level. So I feel like it kind of helped JSN out here. So he didn't run the 40. It seems like he's probably not going to have a great 40 time. Not something I'm super concerned about. And then he was pretty much middle of the pack as a jumper, but he came out and dominated the 20-yard shuttle and the 3-cone drill. He was the top wide receiver in both of those. So even if he's not going to have the crazy 40 time, he clearly is like a well-rounded enough athlete where he's going to be fine, especially in, like the 3-cone, the 20-yard shuttle. Those are things that kind of line up with where he's going to be playing, likely out of the slot, which is where he was able to dominate in college. So I feel like when we're looking at odds of being, mid-tier or mid first-round wide receiver, I think his odds to be the first wide receiver off the board probably went up after the combine. And then you also have Quentin Johnson in there, or Johnston. Those are probably the two dudes who are up there to be the wide receiver one. And then moving over to some of the losers in this wide receiver class, a guy who was originally in that tier, Jordan Addison, just did not have a great overall combine performance. He came in smaller than expected. He was 5'11", believe he was listed at 6 foot, so an inch shorter than we thought. And then he came in at 171 pounds, which is pretty light, for an NFL wide receiver. Obviously, we had the whole weight thing with Devonta Smith, but we also came with some not so great athletic testing from Jordan Addison. So he ran a 4.49 40, which isn't terrible, but at 171 pounds, you would like to see him moving a little bit faster than that. And then he was also towards the bottom of the class in terms of the vertical and the broad jump. There were reports that he was dealing with a back sprain. I think he ended up not even finishing the combine with that, but I guess we'll have to see if those numbers look any better at his pro day. Coming into the combine, it seemed like he was kind of a lock to be a first rounder. Now, maybe he still gets in there, but it definitely doesn't feel like a guarantee. So now I'm not someone who's going to see these numbers from the combine and be like, oh, he's a bad player. He's off my radar. Obviously he had some very impressive college seasons, especially a sophomore season and then a solid junior year. So he's definitely not someone I'm giving up on, but I do think, going from maybe mid top 20 picks in the draft and then now going into the second round, if he does fall there, I do think, we have to kind of change how we're viewing him just a little bit. So I do think he's an overall loser from this combine. And then the other wide receiver, I think, probably the more significant loser here from the combine, Kayshon Boutte. The red flags here are kind of just starting to pile up. He was someone who was ranked as like a top 2, top 3 wide receiver heading into the 2022 season. He underwhelms in 2022. There were issues pretty much all throughout the season. There were issues in the spring practices. And then after the first game, he deletes all his stuff off social media from LSU. So it just seemed like a weird fit there. And the season was pretty underwhelming from what we saw of him as a freshman and a sophomore. So you can kind of, excuse that. He also had the weird thing where he was going to go back to school, and then he switched around on that, declared for the draft. So you had, these different things going on. He was underperforming. He had some of the stuff with the coaching staff. And then he comes in and his athletic testing was not very good. His 40 was all right at 4.5, but he was dead last in vertical jump and then second to last in the broad jump. He had a decent 20-yard shuttle, but he kind of seemed like a dude who could potentially get like early round 2 draft capital. That, round 2 draft capital kind of seems like it's fading away at this point. So just not a great overall look here. And it kind of just seems like he's been on a downward trajectory ever since that sophomore season. And now moving on to the last position, we have the tight ends. Honestly, overall, a very athletic tight end group. I mean, we could have had a ton of winners on here. I chose Darnell Washington specifically. This dude is just an absolute freak. So he came in at 6'6", 264. I did see a photo. He was next to another tight end who I think came in at like either 6'6" or 6'6.5". And Washington, they were both not wearing shoes. And Washington looked like he was a good inch and a half taller than this dude. So I don't know if that 6'6" number is accurate, but whatever it is, the dude is huge. He's massive, but he's also super athletic. Ran a 4.64 40. Didn't do anything crazy as a jumper, but he actually had the fastest 20-yard shuttle at the tight end position, doing that at 264 pounds. Very, very solid. It kind of seems like with his stock rising, he's a fantastic blocker. It feels like he's going to be a first-round pick at this point. He was someone that I wasn't super high on. I think I had him as like my tight end 5 when I did my tight end rankings for this class in terms of fantasy. But that was kind of under the assumption that he wasn't going to be super involved as a pass catcher, going to be more used as a blocking heavy tight end. But with that athleticism, it does seem like the potential is there for a team to want to use him as a pass catcher, especially if you're drafting him in the first round. You know, you could probably get a blocking dude a little bit later in the draft. So definitely someone to keep an eye on and someone who had a great weekend, I guess. And then the last player I'm going to be talking about here is Michael Mayer. And I do have him as a little bit of a loser from this combine. Now, he wasn't a dude where I was expecting, crazy athletic testing from him. And it kind of came through like that. They weren't overly encouraging. They weren't terrible, but he was more of like an average, maybe slightly above average athlete. Like I did say, this tight end class was very impressive athletically, so it probably made him look a little bit worse than he would have normally. He ran a 4.7 40, which, is fine. He did have the third lowest tight end vertical jump, and then he was also in the bottom half in terms of broad jumping. I still view him as the best fantasy tight end, so you may be wondering, like, if you still have him there, how is he a loser from this combine? I think coming into the combine and maybe still after it, a lot of people were valuing him as like a back end of the first round Dynasty rookie draft pick or a early second round guy, so somewhere like player number 11, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. I made a video about the tight ends. I kind of talked about, like, if we're drafting Dalton Kincaid in the early third round, I'm fading Michael Mayer at that price, and I'm getting Kincaid, getting Musgrove, getting some of these other solid tight ends. So for me, I just don't think we can view him here at the tight end position. We want to be shooting for that upside. We want to be going after those freak athletes. I think Mayer could be a very solid tight end. He's a very solid pass catcher, but I just don't know if he has that massive ceiling. He could come in and give you really solid tight end 6, tight end 7, tight end 8 point per game numbers. But in reality, tight end 6 to tight end 15, they're all pretty much in that same range. So I'm just wondering if the ceiling is going to be there for him. Could be wrong, and maybe he falls in the draft a little bit because of this, but he'll probably still be late first round, somewhere in there. So that is going to wrap it up for the biggest winners and losers from the combine. Let me know what you guys think. What were your takeaways from the combine? Any players I missed? Obviously, I could have thrown a few more dudes in here, but trying to kind of keep it concise, talking about some of the most important players. But thank you all for stopping by as always, and I'll see you all in the next one.